First, he emptied our 12-year-old's college fund to impress a mistress. By sunrise, she turned the evidence into consequences. If stories like this help you protect your family, please like and quietly subscribe to Not So Perfect Family 365 so more families spot the red flags before it's too late. The coffee maker sputtered. A zipper rasped down the hall. Mark stepped into the kitchen with the gray Samsonite from his business trips, face set like a locked door. "Why the suitcase?" I asked, bracing. "I need to breathe, Sarah." He didn't look at me. He adjusted his watch and kept for the front door. Emma padded in, socks on tile, hair in a crooked ponytail. 12. She clocked the suitcase, my face, and the phone lying face down like a guilty pet. "Breakfast," I said, because that's what mothers say when the ground shifts. She poured cereal. Mark opened the closet, hunting for the umbrella he never found when it rained. I picked up my phone to check the time. The banking app badge blinked a red dot. Habit, tap, Face ID, wait, checking, $247.83, savings, $0.00, college fund, $0.00. I refreshed, same numbers. The refrigerator hummed too loudly. "Mark, thin, what happened to our accounts?" "I'm leaving today," he said without turning. "It's better this way. Better than honesty." He faced me. His eyes were flat, the kind of flat that says this conversation happened in his head for months. "I'll sort it out. I need out." "Out of what? Marriage, fatherhood?" Emma's spoon tapped the bowl. "Dad," she tried. "You'll understand when you're older," he said, the line people use when the truth would make them small. "Did you take Emma's fund?" I asked. "It's money," he said. "Money moves. Not without permission." My voice was steadier than my hands. He lifted the suitcase handle. The click sounded rehearsed. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder than stealing from your daughter." Emma set her bowl down with impossible care. "Mom," she said, almost a whisper, "it's okay." "It is not okay." She met my eyes, steady and dark. "Don't worry, I handled it." The sentence didn't belong in a 7th grader's mouth. It belonged to a fixer, not my kid with a backpack bigger than her torso. Mark reached for the knob. I stepped in front of him. "Look at her," I said. "If you're going to go, at least look at what you're leaving." He glanced for 3 seconds, maybe 4. "I left you a voicemail," he told me. "I don't want a voicemail, I want an answer." "Please, Sarah." He dropped his tone like I was a flight he had to make. The suitcase rolled. My phone vibrated. A new email slid across the lock screen, "All funds transferred 3 days ago." I didn't feel my knees bend, but I was suddenly on the bench by the shoe rack, phone in my lap, the subject line glaring like a bad joke. Emma stood. She kissed my cheek. "Quick and fierce?" "I'm going to be late for the bus," she said, as if buses still mattered. Mark twisted the knob. Metal clicked. Outside, the gate key turned with a bright final sound. Cold air moved in when he opened the door. He didn't look back. The email banner faded. The coffee beeped once, as if any of this could be fixed with sugar and cream. Grief didn't arrive loud. It moved in quietly, folded itself into the couch cushions and the places his shoes used to sit. It kept the house at room temperature and let the mail pile up in a polite stack. I stood inside it and couldn't tell if I was breathing. Emma did not change. At 6:40 she woke to the same chime. At 6:55 her uniform skirt was ironed, backpack zipped, lunch packed with an efficiency that felt borrowed from some other household. At 7:10 she set a bowl on the counter, poured cereal, sliced a banana with the caution of a surgeon. At 7:14 she checked the front window for the bus, and at 7:15 she kissed my cheek and said, "Have a good day, Mom." If I blinked, I might have believed last week was still last week. By noon I was still in pajamas, scrubbing a coffee ring that wasn't there. I kept opening the banking app like refreshing the numbers would make our lives refill. Checking $247.83, savings $0, college fund $0. The zeros were smooth, unbothered. I closed the app and the room swayed gently like a boat. That night I cooked out of muscle memory. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, the comfort food that solves nothing and still tries. We ate at the small table, the empty chair a punctuation mark. "How was school?" I asked. Emma swallowed. "We started the Industrial Revolution unit. Mr. Levin did the steam engine thing with the kettle. The whistle," she smiled, brief and real. "Still loud. Any homework? A report, a beat. I'll do it upstairs." After dishes, I stood in the doorway of her room. The lights were warm, her desk was arranged like a catalog photo, planner square to the edge, highlighters in a gradient, charger coiled neatly. She had angled the laptop just enough that I could see nothing of the screen. "Need help?" I offered. I had nothing to offer. "I'm good," she said without looking up. "Thanks for dinner." I kissed the top of her head. Her hair smelled like the coconut shampoo we share. On the way out, I paused and looked too long. She felt it and lifted a hand to tug the screen a fraction closer to her, gentle but decisive. I told myself it was privacy. 12 requires a little corner with a door. The house at night had its old noises. The heater ticking, the fridge humming, a pipe that coughed once at 10:03 like a smoker clearing his throat. New was the whispering percussion from Emma's room, the soft, steady tapping of keys. Not frantic, not game-playing, rhythmic. A metronome for thoughts I didn't have access to. I lay in bed counting the beats, trying to pin them to English class paragraphs, to steam engines, to anything ordinary. Last Thursday we'd eaten spaghetti, while Mark told a story about a client who couldn't make up his mind about a shipment. He'd kissed my forehead, while I rinsed plates and hummed the song that gets stuck in your teeth, the one from the soundtrack Emma loved when she was 8. Last Thursday he'd set his phone face down, as if the screen might look back at him and say his name out loud. I didn't hear the metronome then. Maybe it was already playing. The next afternoon I came home early from the library because I could. The house had the hollow quiet of an auditorium between shows. I carried a basket of folded laundry upstairs, grateful for the lie of productivity, and set Emma's stack on her bed. Her room was so clean it felt staged. On the desk, Mr. Levin's handout sat under a thin paperback, The Industrial Revolution Primary Sources. A corner of paper peeked from beneath the book, white against wood. I shouldn't have looked. Mothers shouldn't look. I looked. It wasn't a worksheet. It was an email, printed and highlighted with a patient hand. At the top, a logo from Mark's company. Below it, black letters that jumped, then arranged themselves. To Rebecca Sterling. Subject, Thursday, hotel is confirmed. The banana in my stomach went cold. My thumb left a moon on the paper. There, in the familiar font of my husband's life, was a name I didn't recognize and understood immediately. The rest of the page blurred and then sharpened again, paragraph by paragraph, like a lens choosing its honesty. That night the house settled with its old groans, and I stood outside Emma's door listening to the keys again, soft, even like rain you only hear when you decide to. I knocked. Teeth, then lights. I said, the oldest script in our home. 2 minutes, she answered, already brushing. When she clicked the lamp off, I waited until the hallway felt honest. Then I went back in with a laundry basket as cover, like I needed a reason to cross the carpet. The nightlight threw a small moon across her room. Her desk slept, squared to the wall. The Industrial Revolution packet lay where she'd left it. The laptop was gone, tucked somewhere I didn't know. I don't know what made me kneel. Maybe a memory. 6-year-old Emma sliding shoeboxes under here, a museum of rocks and ticket stubs. My hand went searching for cardboard. It found something else, spiral metal, cool and gritty. A notebook. It wasn't a diary. There were no hearts over eyes, no names pressed into margins. It looked like a field manual. Tabs in 3 colors. A table of contents in her blocky print, accounts, transactions, contacts, timelines. My name appeared twice. So did hers. The first page was a list of emails and sites, handwritten, no passwords, just phrases like same base, different endings, and never logs out on desktop. Next to Mark's name, she'd boxed pattern repeats. I felt sick, not because of what she had, but because the pattern sounded like him, the man who ordered the same thing every time until the server knew. The second page was a tree drawn in pencil, branches labeled with banks we used, and 3 I had never seen. Lines connected to smaller bubbles. Savings, joint, then auto pay, then 2 bubbles in red. Sarah, Newco, Emma, Edu Trust. Newco, Edu Trust. I traced the branch with my finger like I could change where it went. Tucked into the spiral were printouts. Cropped screenshots of balances, transfers listed by date, amounts that matched nothing in my memory. There were sticky notes with times. Tues 10:17 p.m., bulk transfer Fry 7:32 a.m., mobile login Sun 11:04 p.m., credit check pulled me credit check for what? I flipped. More pages. A timeline neat as a lab report. Week -6, late nights, phone face down. Week -5, Rebecca S. appears. Week -4, new email alias registers. Week -3, first movement out of college fund. Week -2, credit inquiry E. Flagged. Week -1, hotel reservation. Day 0, suitcase. Underneath, in a smaller hand, almost apologetic. Mom, I wanted to be sure. I sat on her bed and felt the mattress give and remember other giving, the way she used to roll into me during storms, small breath against my arm. I turned another page and found a column of numbers I knew too well. The last 4 digits of my social. The last 4 of Emma's. Next to them, used on app attached to pre-approval, reported, the word circled twice. Reported to whom? My throat went dry. There were more printouts, emails with blocks of black where she'd redacted things I guess she didn't want me to read yet, phone numbers, annotated work, personal boss. A sheet labeled vocab like she was studying. Loan not equal to theft, consent, identity, fiduciary. Next to fiduciary, she'd written people trust ledgers more than words. A new tab, debt. The page smelled like paper and anger. She listed dates and amounts I didn't recognize. Cash withdrawals, ACH, to a platform I'd heard Mark brag about during a Monday Night Football ad. Crypto with a name that sounded like a child's toy and fire at the same time. Notes in the margin. Leverage, losses compound, promises. I'll put it back. There was a column for bookie, with a question mark so dark the paper almost tore. A line arrowed from crypto losses to new accounts S and E and finally to cover story, investment opportunity. Mom, her voice was behind me steady. I jumped like the guilty one. I hadn't heard the bathroom door, hadn't heard the floorboard that squeaks outside the linen closet. She stood in the doorway in an old camp t-shirt, hair damp, looking at me not like a child catching a parent snooping, but like an adult catching another adult going where she knew they'd go. I was putting away your laundry, I said, still sitting on her bed with the evidence of our lives open in my hands. I know, she said. You always fold the sleeves in. We stared at each other. I held up the notebook. What is this, Emma? Documentation. No wobble, no apology. Of what? Of everything Dad did before he left. Of what Rebecca helped him do. Of the banks that should have caught it. She walked in and sat next to me, close enough that our knees touched. You needed facts. I needed them too. This, I touched the red bubbles with our names. These are accounts. Shell things, she said. Names that look like education trusts or onboarding payroll. He used our information to open lines, to move money through. How do you even know that? How did you? I stopped, hearing my own fear. Emma, this crosses lines. She thought for a second, then agreed. It does. You're 12. He stole identities, Mom. The way she said it wasn't defensive, it was arithmetic. Mine, yours. He was counting on us to cry and wait. I didn't want to wait. I don't want you anywhere near their mess. I heard my voice climb. This is dangerous, not just the money, the kind of people who... I didn't touch anything, she said. I watched, I wrote it down. I took what I could legally take, copies of our own records. I learned how to flag things. There are ways to tell the right people without being the wrong kind of brave. The right people, I repeated, clinging to the phrase. She pointed at a page marked process. A list of numbers, not of accounts, but of hotlines and agencies, boxes checked next to credit freeze, fraud alert, identity theft report initiated. In the margin she'd written, we are not powerless, and drawn a small square like a door. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, softening because she had saved us when I could not. I wanted to be sure, she said again. And I didn't want to break you with maybes. The notebook felt heavy, like if I put it on a scale it would tell me how much childhood we'd spent. I turned one more page because I couldn't not. It was the simplest page in the whole book, one line written dead center, the pencil pressed so hard the indentation showed through to the next sheet. Florida, closing date, pending. The thing about ledgers, Emma said, is they're like diaries. People think they're dull, but they confess if you read them out loud. We sat at the kitchen table with the notebook between us, a legal pad of my own under my palm like training wheels. She had added a new tab, ledgers, not screenshots of keyboards or secret tricks, columns and dates, totals that were supposed to land neatly and didn't. How did you even? Paper, she said. And patterns. Dad prints things he shouldn't. He leaves mail in the trunk. He keeps drafts in the kitchen junk drawer under the rubber bands. I knew that drawer. Batteries, a tape measure, ticket stubs, and apparently the splinters of our life. She laid out 3 sets of numbers. This is what clients see on monthly statements, she said, tapping the first page with her pencil. This is what the custody bank shows for the same period, tap the second page, and this is the internal spreadsheet Rebecca used to track allocations. The third page had a different rhythm, cells colored, footnotes in the corner, totals that rounded wrong and then magically righted themselves 2 lines later. You have her spreadsheet, I said, wary of the verb have. I have a copy of something Dad left in the printer tray, she said. A draft for a client review. People love calling things drafts when they're just sloppy. I match dates and amounts to the public parts, the client statements that go out, and the bank's website totals a normal client could check. The columns are supposed to reconcile, they don't. Maybe it's timing. I tried, the wife in me appealing for some less brutal explanation. Emma shook her head. Timing differences correct next month. These don't, see, the same invoice number appears twice, 2 different clients, 2 similar amounts, and here look at the memo line. She held the page so I could see, admin fee RS Housing Trust. RS as in, Rebecca Sterling, Emma finished. A trust doesn't prove anything by itself. But the admin fees move on the same days the client's balances drop, and then there's a matching bump in a brand new account. The bump doesn't show up on the custody bank side. It shows up in an external destination called Housing Trust. I looked at the line like it might sprout a voice and apologize. They're skimming. They're moving, Emma corrected. Skimming sounds like cream off milk. This is taking spoons out of people's mouths. Names rolled down the page, anonymous to me until they weren't. Mrs. K, I read. Retired school counselor, Emma added. Lives on Maple. She wears the red coat at the bus stop with the buttons like cherries. You shouldn't know that. I walk by her every day, she said simply. And this family here, S. Patel, they have a kid in your book club author visits. He asked a question about plot twists and everyone clapped. She paused. They're real people, Mom. Something thrummed in my chest, an old librarian's bone-tuning fork struck by the word real. I thought of jackets draped over shoulders, hands counting quarters for field trip fees, trust placed in nice fonts and quarterly calls. How long? I asked. 2 years, maybe more. RS Housing Trust lines up with a Florida closing calendar. Transfers spike before holiday weekends. People look away on Fridays. Did you talk to anyone? I don't contact victims, she said, small and precise. That's not safe or appropriate. I don't accuse. I compare numbers that belong together and write down where they don't. Then I tell the people whose job it is to match the numbers. Who are those people? She turned the notebook to the process page again. Boxes added since last night. Employer compliance, regulator intake, credit bureaus. There are forms. You don't have to know the whole ocean. You just pull the fire alarm in your hallway. A face surfaced in my memory. A school auction 3 years ago. Year the gym smelled like carnations because the florist over-delivered. A woman with ironed hair and a gold necklace that said R in a cursive that pretended to be casual. She'd laughed with Janet while we put baked ziti on warming trays. Rebecca, Janet had said like they had a shorthand. I had assumed she was a donor or a parent from the other elementary school. The memory made my skin feel a size too small. Do you know her? I asked too quickly. Emma watched me. Not really, she said, which was both true and not. I know her ledgers. Ledgers can be wrong, I said, because hope is a habit. They can, she agreed. But they tell one story over and over. Money goes into clients' accounts, then out through fees that don't exist on the bank side, then into RS Housing Trust. When I overlay the dates with the county property records in Florida, there's an address attached to the trust's pre-approval. It's coastal. It has a blue door in the listing photos. You pulled property records. They're public, she said. You taught me that when we looked up who owned the lot behind the library. Remember the man with the dogs? I did. I'd called it civic curiosity then. It felt like a weapon now and a shield at the same time. What happens if we tell? My voice came out thin. What happens to us? We don't tell a story, Emma said. We send the numbers with dates where they go. We make the calls that are ours to make. Freezes, alerts, reports. We keep copies. We speak calmly. We use words like documentation and pattern and discrepancy. And if they come at us, she didn't flinch. Daylight is a deterrent. I looked down at the legal pad I'd been gripping and realized I'd written that sentence in my own hand without knowing. Daylight is a deterrent twice, underlined. Emma slid a manila envelope from her backpack. The tab had neat block letters, employer packet. Inside, a cover page that read, to whom it may concern, reconciliation inconsistencies requiring review, followed by a summary of mismatches any supervisor could verify without us ever saying how we knew to look. No accusations, just arrows pointing at math. You wrote a cover letter, I said. 3, she admitted. 1 for the firm's compliance officer, 1 for the state board that licenses advisors, and 1 for the custody bank's fraud department. Same facts, different vocabulary. Why different? People hear best in their own language. Compliance likes controls, boards like fiduciary, banks like unauthorized movement and custodial break. Her calm made me want to cry and stand up at the same time. When does this go? In the morning, she said. I scheduled the emails for 9:01 a.m. so they hit desks after coffee but before meetings. Is that strategic? She smiled like I'd told a joke. It's polite. I watched her slip the envelope back into her bag, watched the way her fingers checked each edge, corners aligned. Outside, the wind pushed a branch against the siding with a slow, deliberate scrape. Emma, I said when she stood. Are you scared? She thought. I'm alert. Then she added softer. I know you're scared for me. That helps me not be. We cleaned the table. She rinsed her glass and left it upside down on the towel, water beating like mercury. She kissed my cheek, the second kiss in 2 days that felt like a promise contracted without lawyers. The house went to its night noises again. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling until the plaster turned into a map. I tried to picture a blue door on a Florida street and couldn't. I could only see red circles around names, red flags in margins, red bubbles with Sarah, Nuco, and Emma, EduTrust connected to a line that shouldn't exist. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new email notification brightened the room. For a second, I saw the glow and thought the scheduled messages had bounced back. It wasn't from a regulator or a bank or Rebecca's firm. Unknown number, stay out of other people's books. At 9:01 a.m., the emails left our outbox like small, precise birds. one to the firm's compliance officer, one to the state board, one to the custody bank. Same math, 3 dialects. Emma watched the sending spinner and nodded once as if she'd just set a clock. Now we breathe, she said. I tried. Breathing felt like borrowing. By 9:17 my phone rang with a number I didn't know. This is Riverside Savings Fraud Services, a woman said, voice clean as a checklist. We've received a report regarding potential identity misuse on accounts associated with Sarah Patterson and Emma Patterson. We've placed a 90-day fraud alert and suggest a credit freeze with the bureaus. May I review recent inquiries with you? I sat at the kitchen table with a pen that suddenly weighed a pound. Yes, she read a list that didn't belong to me. Retail cards I've never wanted. A pre-approval for something called an RS Housing Trust line. I could feel Emma listening from the opposite chair, not hovering, present. We didn't open any of those, I said, feeling the apology crawl into my throat even though I owed none. We've documented your statement, the woman said. You'll receive letters with case numbers and next steps. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. Yes, I'm sorry you're going through this. She meant it. It sounded like a hand on a shoulder in a world that prefers forms. When I hung up, Emma slid a printed sheet across the table, 3 website URLs and a neat box next to each. Equifax freeze, Experian freeze, TransUnion freeze. Click Create PINs, write them on this card, put it in the blue folder, she said, as if we were assembling a school project. We did it together, each confirmation email a small brick mortared into something like a wall. The library called next. Linda, my supervisor, whispered like the stacks were listening. A lender called to verify your employment, she said. I told them HR handles that and we don't release information without written consent. They claimed they had your signed authorization. I didn't sign anything, I said. My voice sounded like someone had ironed it too flat. They faxed a copy. Paper rustled. Sarah, it's your name but not your hand. I held the edge of the table until it stopped moving. Thank you for not confirming. Always, she said. If they call back, I'll have HR note fraud. After we hung up, the kitchen felt smaller as if the chairs had edged in. Emma wrote employment verif. Library attempt 924 in her notebook and capped the pen with the kind of care people use on explosives. At 10:03, Mark called. His name on my screen looked wrong, like it needed a warning label. I let it ring twice for courage and answered. Hello, Sarah. His voice was less iron, more wire. We need to talk. About what? About the fact that my financial accounts are frozen, and Rebecca was escorted out of her building this morning on a compliance review, and I'm being told there are discrepancies that make no sense. He inhaled, a jagged sound. Someone is doing this to us. To you, I said. To us, he repeated, like repetition could make it shared. Did you hire someone, a private investigator, a hacker? I didn't hire anyone. Then who? His voice pitched up. In the background I heard a faint chime, one of those security pings phones make when settings change. He hissed. Another alert, Jesus. Maybe call your bank, I said. I did. They're saying words like pattern and unauthorized movement and custodial break, and it sounds rehearsed. It sounds like the way you talk when you've already decided a story. Stories are for people, I said. Numbers are for ledgers. He went quiet. You're enjoying this, he said, small and ugly. I'm not. I looked at Emma. She was looking at the clock. Calm isn't enjoyment, sometimes it's survival. Call off whatever this is, he said. Tell whoever you've hired to stop. This is illegal. What's illegal is using your daughter's information for debt, I said. My hands were shaking, but my voice found a narrow road and stayed on it. What's illegal is taking money out of accounts it didn't come from. You don't understand, he snapped. There was a plan, you'll understand when. The line clicked. Not a hang-up, a switch. Another chime on his end. He swore loud enough that I flinched. They're in my email. He said, I'm getting access notifications. Someone is. Mark. I kept my voice even. Call your bank, call a lawyer, do not call me to ask me to fix what you broke. He made a sound like a laugh with teeth in it. You've always been dramatic, he said, and then the call died. We sat with the dial tone's ghost for a moment. Emma wrote Mark, accounts frozen 10:03 and then stopped, pen hovering. He'll change the narrative, she said. He'll call it a misunderstanding with a plan to repay. He'll say we're vindictive. He already started. Daylight, she reminded me. At 11:12, my inbox chimed with a subject line that tasted metallic. Cease and desist, defamation/interference. The email was from a law firm with a lobby-sent name, Fisher and Morrow. Attached was a PDF with paragraphs that sounded expensive. The letter accused me, and / or agents acting on your behalf, of making false and malicious statements about Rebecca Sterling and causing irreparable professional harm. It demanded we retract and refrain. I read it twice. I didn't cry, didn't throw things. I poured water I didn't drink and forwarded the email to an address Emma had written on a post-it, State board intake at, with a single line, please see attached demand received after filing reconciliation concerns. We stand by the math. Emma scanned the PDF over my shoulder. Same firm that appears on the Florida pre-approval packet, she said, tapping the footer. They do closings. How do you? Public records, she said. It's all public until it isn't. At noon, the doorbell rang. A postal carrier stood with a certified mail envelope and a tired smile. Signature, he said. My name was on the label, but the return address was Coastal Title and Escrow. Inside, notice of closing re. 118 Blue Door Lane, St. Augustine. Closing date, Friday 10 a.m. Borrower names. Emma Patterson, minor, Sarah Patterson. A yellow sticky, impersonal and chirpy said, see you soon. Bring 2 forms of ID. I didn't authorize this, I said to the air because air was what I had. Emma leaned over the island, reading, her jaw set. They're trying to rush the wire before freezes propagate everywhere, she said. Some systems lag. Can they? They'll try. My phone buzzed again. A text from unknown number, last warning. Stay out of other people's books. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang a second time, quick like knuckles that knew the house. Not the mailman, not a neighbor. Who is it? I called. A man's voice, smooth and wrong. Coastal Title. We just need to confirm a couple of signatures before tomorrow. Don't open it, Emma said, already moving to the hallway table where we keep the little notebook with emergency numbers. Her voice had a low gear I hadn't heard before. Who is it? I called again through the door. Coastal Title, the man repeated, too quick. Just need to confirm a couple of signatures before tomorrow. Slide your business card under the door, Emma said. And your state license. A beat, no card slid. The peephole showed a man in a blazer holding a clipboard he wanted me to read through 2 inches of wood. The smile didn't reach his eyes. We don't verify like this, he said. Ma'am, this is routine. Routine doesn't knock without an appointment, Emma said. We'll contact your office directly. I dialed the number printed on the certified letter. A recorded voice thanked me, then offered a directory. I tapped for closings, gave the file number. The woman on the line sounded confused, then careful. We don't send people door to door, she said. Please don't sign anything. If someone's there, call non-emergency. I hung up, called the city's non-emergency line, gave our address, and repeated the sentence that made my mouth taste like pennies. Someone's trying to rush a fraudulent closing. Emma filmed the threshold from a wide angle, not the man's face. Just a timestamp, a voice, the uncooperative slot where a business card should have appeared. The knock came softer once, then vanished. The peep showed only our doormat, welcome rubbed to welk. Emma locked the top deadbolt with a click that sounded like a boundary drawn, then checked the window, then breathed. Daylight, she said. Always daylight. My phone lit up before my lungs settled. Mark. I stared, Emma nodded. Speaker, she said. I answered. Hello, why would you do this? He said, skipping hello. His voice had the ragged edge of someone who ran a sprint and lost. Rebecca's accounts are under forensic review. My bank called, my boss called. The title company says there's a flag on the file with your name on it. Are you trying to ruin my life? You're doing that on your own, I said. Sarah, he swallowed. I love you, I love Emma. This is a misunderstanding that got out of hand. I took a loan against the fund, that's all. You'll understand when. Emma put her hand out. I gave her the phone. Hi, Dad, she said. Silence, then a shaky Emma. Thank God, Angel, your mother. You called it love, Emma said, calm as a ruler. Banks call it fraud. The board calls it a breach. I call it consequences. I was going to pay it back, he rushed. We had an opportunity, Rebecca's father. Rebecca's father is now concerned about his own license, Emma said. He's asked his attorneys to step back. Rebecca hasn't returned your calls since yesterday at 4:12 p.m. She blocked you at 5:03. How would you, Emma? You're 12. You can't possibly comprehend the complexities here. The complexities are simple, she said. You moved $75,000 out of a minor's educational account without consent. You attached my name to applications I didn't sign. You initiated a mortgage process leveraging identities that aren't yours. And you did it while telling Mom you needed to breathe. He exhaled, a laugh broken in half. You sound like a pamphlet. I sound like a ledger, she said. Ledgers don't care about excuses. Eka is not a thief, he snapped, the name catching like a burr. She's been under pressure, yes, but she's... Rebecca has 2 sets of books, Emma said. Her admin fees don't appear on custodial statements. They do appear in an entity pointed at a coastal address with a blue door. There are reconciliation gaps any junior auditor can see. Your compliance officer will see them by lunch. Who fed you this? He demanded. Janet, someone at the firm. Are you stalking me? Are you? We documented discrepancies and sent them to the people paid to care, Emma said. No one had to feed us. You left most of it in printers and glove boxes. Emma, his voice softened, reached for an old version of her. Sweetheart, I made a mistake, but I did it for us, for our future. I wanted to build something better. You started by stealing a child's future, she said. That's not how building works. You don't understand love, he said. Small and bitter, you think love is a spreadsheet. Love takes risk. Love protects, she said. Risk with other people's identities is theft. I'm still your father. You taught me something important, Emma said, and I watched her mouth form the sentence like she'd built it out of Lego bricks and patience. You taught me to protect myself. Emma, please, she ended the call. The kitchen suddenly had extra space where his voice had been. We stood in the quiet, both of us listening to our hearts catch up. Outside, a car door thudded down the block. Inside, the refrigerator cycled, the house remembering ordinary life. Emma set the phone down like putting away a knife. She looked older and also more like my kid than she had in weeks. You okay? I asked. She considered. I'm steady. A new sound cut the air, an email chime with a tone I didn't recognize. On the screen, from compliance with a subject that tightened my throat. Request for interview reconciliation review. The body was polite, professional, and very interested in a concise timeline with documents handy. Emma met my eyes. Daylight, she said again. We both jumped when the doorbell rang a second time. Not a knock. A ring, 2 short bursts, then 1 long. The peephole showed a different silhouette, a uniform this time, a badge glinting in the afternoon blur. Non-emergency sent us, the officer said when I stayed behind the chain. We heard there was someone misrepresenting a title company. Emma's gaze flicked me to the chain, to the manila envelope on the counter with "See you soon" in bubbly ink. Ma'am, the officer said, patient. Just a minute, I said, and slid the chain back 1 link, but not all the way. The uniformed officer stood on the porch while I kept the chain on. He took notes, asked for the certified letter, and frowned at the sticky note with the cheerful handwriting. Title companies don't do door-to-door, he said, which we already knew. He gave me a case number on a card that smelled like leather wallet and sun. Call if he returns. Don't sign anything at the door ever. Daylight, Emma murmured when we shut the door like a benediction. We both exhaled at the same time and for a second laughed at nothing. It wasn't happy, it was oxygen. That night, the keys in her room kept their soft metronome, but I slept in 20-minute segments. At 5, I emailed Dr. Martinez, our pediatrician, from the kitchen table. By 9, her nurse wrote back with a name and a slot. Dr. Patricia Reeves, today at 3:30. I printed insurance cards because printing things makes me feel like I'm doing something. Dr. Reeves's office was painted in ocean colors that tried a little too hard. Children's drawings crowded a wall, triangles with smiles, a purple cat, a spaceship that looked like a toaster. The receptionist offered water like it was a ritual. Emma sat upright, hands on her knees as if waiting to interview the doctor. Emma, Dr. Reeves said when she opened the door, warm, unhurried. I'm Patricia. Sometimes I talk with kids when grown-up problems land on their plates. Want to sit with me for a bit? Okay, Emma said, and followed her down the hall without looking back. She didn't need me to come. She let me know that by not saying it. I waited in a chair that believed in lumbar support. Mothers filtered through the hour with diaper bags and apologies, and I wore a groove in the appointment reminder card with my thumb. When the door opened again, Dr. Reeves was smiling a professional smile that didn't say anything yet. She's very clear, the doctor said, sitting across from me. Very organized in how she understands what's happened. She's 12, I blurted, as if age should change math. Gifted kids can make 12 look like 30, Dr. Reeves said. It's not that they don't feel. It's that they often intellectualize first. They build a scaffolding for the feeling and stand on that. What did she tell you? My voice snagged on she told. She walked me through a timeline. The transfer from the college account, the documents with your names, the mortgage attempt. She used vocabulary most of my residents don't use correctly. When I asked how those facts made her feel, she said, the doctor checked a note. Satisfied that there are consequences and that my mother is safer than she was before. Satisfied. The word clicked somewhere tender. I thought of her kissing my cheek and washing her glass and scheduling emails for 9:01 a.m. like courtesy. She's not crying, I said. She doesn't react. She reacts by acting, Dr. Reeves said. That's a reaction, it's adaptive. Some children collapse when they lose the net they believed was under them. Some children start weaving their own net. Neither is more moral than the other. One will just terrify a parent in a different way. She terrifies me, I admitted, because honesty is cheaper than therapy and we were already paying the co-pay. She's precise. She keeps lists. She doesn't flinch. I keep waiting for the crash. She may crash later, Dr. Reeves said, gentle and plain, or not at all. She may grieve differently, small, private calibrations instead of storms. The point isn't to make her feel the way you would feel. The point is to make sure her way has room to be human. How do I do that? Make room for both truths, she said. Praise the competence. Invite the softness. Don't punish her for being the person who saved you. Don't hold her hostage to the child you miss. I stared at the baby blue wall until it blurred. Through it, I saw a smaller Emma in rain boots jumping the same puddle over and over. I saw Mark clapping. The memory shivered and then held. What about the other thing? I said, choosing words like stepping stones over water. The way she gathered facts, the lines she might have crossed to do it. Legal lines matter, Dr. Reeves said. So does safety. From what she described, she's been cautious and frankly more compliant with process than plenty of adults. Keep her routed through proper channels. Emphasize lawful reporting and documentation. You don't have to romanticize boundary pushing to honor her instinct to protect. She wants to present at the PTA, I said. A guide she's writing so families know what to look for. It's good. It's also absurd that it's hers to give. Sometimes the child who was not protected becomes the adult who builds the instructions, Dr. Reeves said. It's a way to metabolize what happened. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, the way counselors do when they need you to carry a sentence home. Your daughter is remarkable, Mrs. Patterson. Her cognitive abilities are extraordinary. Her emotional resilience is real. She's not numb, she's disciplined. She has adapted. The word fell between us and landed upright. Adapted, I repeated. Not broken, she added. For a moment the ocean-painted walls did their job. My lungs found new angles. So she's okay. She's okay, Dr. Reeves said. The question isn't whether she's okay. What is the question? She held my gaze. Whether you're comfortable with who she's becoming. The room went very quiet. Somewhere outside, a printer whirred. The receptionist laughed at something the world still had room for. I opened my mouth and closed it again. Comfort felt like a luxury I hadn't purchased in months. Pride and fear stood shoulder to shoulder and didn't blink. In my purse, my phone buzzed. A subject line bloomed on the lock screen, clean font, sharp edges. Secure Family, Youth Development Program. Invitation for Emma Patterson. The subject line on my phone was the kind that straightens your spine. Secure Family, Youth Development Program. Invitation for Emma Patterson. Emma read it twice, then a third time, eyes moving like she was scanning code. They want a 30-minute call, she said, today. We took it at the kitchen table, the speaker tinny, the recruiter's voice smooth with brochure shine. Emma, your initiative is extraordinary, she said. We fast-track talents like you. Full scholarship, mentorship, paid projects. Imagine the impact. Emma's pencil hovered over a blank page. Who owns the things I build? She asked. Great question, the woman chirped. Standard assignment language so we can protect your innovations and bring them to market. Assignment as in you own it or as in we share. Our program retains rights, the woman said, the smile thinning. We offer generous stipends. Is there a non-compete? A light one, she said, to prevent brand confusion. And can I publish guides for families for free? A pause, we prefer publication through our channels. Emma wrote 3 words on the blank page, strings, ownership, silence. Then she underlined silence. I appreciate the invitation, she said, but I can't accept terms that make other people charge for what I created to protect families who can't pay. Emma, the woman tried, switching to warm authority, you're 13. This is a once-in-a-lifetime ladder. I'm building stairs, Emma said. Stairs have handrails. She ended the call kindly, the way you close a door gently even when you're sure you'll never walk through it. The kitchen filled with nothing for a beat. It felt like oxygen. You just turned down a future, I said, half awe, half terror. I turned down someone else owning it, she said. There's a difference. My phone buzzed again. Janet, coffee, urgent, 10 minutes. Janet and I had been doing coffee since before Emma's teeth came in. She'd held my hand through a miscarriage. I'd sat on her porch when her first marriage dissolved. The cafe 2 blocks down knew our names and how I take it when I'm lying. Extra sugar. She was already at a corner table, hair shellacked into place, the kind of blouse you choose when you want to look like control. She stood and hugged me too long, like time could clear a ledger. I need to tell you something before you see it somewhere else, she said, not touching her latte. I knew about Rebecca. Silence is loud in a cafe. Cups clinked. The milk steamer hissed like a snake. How long? I asked. Months, she swallowed. It started at a fundraiser. She was charming. We traded cards. She asked about Mark's work. I mentioned he felt stuck. She said she could mentor him into a better lane, help him start something of his own. It sounded generous. And you didn't tell me. I thought it was professional, she said quickly. I didn't want to blow up your life if it was just a phase. And she opened a door for me too. A small consulting contract. I've been chasing work and you took money. Not from you, she said, the defense weak as tracing paper. From her firm, it was separate. Nothing's separate when it buys your silence, I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't shake, it cut. You watched me brag about Mark's lasagna and you nodded and asked for seconds. You stood in my kitchen and complimented our Christmas cards. You knew. I kept telling myself I'd say something when it was real, she said, the words tumbling, desperate to assemble themselves into an excuse that didn't rot. Then it was real and I was already in it. In what? In a retainer, she whispered. And a referral fee. Rebecca said it was normal. Everybody does it. Sarah, I'm sorry. I stared at the tiny brown island where coffee had dried on the table's lacquered surface. Did you know he took the fund? No, she said. Too fast and then slower. No, I suspected something. He started texting during book club and I didn't want to see it. You didn't want to lose a contract, I said. She flinched. I am not the villain here. You're not the hero either, I said, standing. You knew enough to pick a side. You chose the invoice. Please don't do this, she said, fingers closing around my wrist with old familiarity. We're not we, I said and peeled her hand off. I walked home with my coffee untouched, my breath counting to 4 in and out like a beginner's class. The sky had that late afternoon white that makes you think of headaches. At our porch, a man in a suit with a messenger bag climbed our steps like he belonged to them. Sarah Patterson, he said. Yes. He held out a thick envelope, practiced neutral. You've been served. I didn't take it. He placed it on the rail and left without drama, the way professionals do when they deliver other people's storms. Inside, Fisher & Morrow LLP emergency motion for temporary injunction. Language like blades. Defendant has engaged in a campaign of interference and reputational harm. Defendant is alienating minor child from her father. Ex parte relief sought. Hearing set for Friday 8:30 a.m. Alienating, I said, tasting the word. They're going to make this about custody. Emma read over my shoulder, eyes narrowing at the phrase ex parte. He wants to talk to a judge without us in the room, she said. He wants to lock down the narrative. A smaller stack was clipped behind it. Notice to preserve electronic evidence, emails, texts, posts. It read like a dare and a threat and a map. What do we do? I asked. Emma looked at the clock. We make a list, we call the right people, we keep our own receipts. She reached for a pen, I reached for the phone. The doorbell rang again, short, long, while my call was still ringing. The short, long doorbell still echoed when I cracked the door on the chain. Not a fake closer. A woman in a navy windbreaker, badge on a lanyard, stood on our porch like a rainy day. MS, Patterson, I'm Nora Norris with the Division of Financial Regulation. I'm following up on reconciliation concerns submitted this morning. Through the website, Emma said behind me, voice even. We'd like a concise timeline and copies of anything that's yours to share, the woman said. We don't need how you came to be curious. We care what exists and where the numbers don't match. We also prefer not to involve minors directly. We can attribute the report to household representative. Me, I said, too fast. I'm the representative. She passed a card with a case number and a pamphlet titled Identity Theft. What to do next? Preserve emails, don't post anything public, route all contact through this address. You may receive a notice from the custody bank as well. We'll keep you informed. Can we stay anonymous? I asked. As far as the process allows, she said. Our priority is to protect victims and the integrity of the review. When she left, the kitchen felt larger, as if the paperwork had pushed the walls back an inch. Emma wrote DFR case 21-743, Norris in her notebook, underlined once. Right people, she said. Right doors. At 11:58, compliance wrote back, thank you for your submission. We are initiating a reconciliation review. Do not contact any firm employees. At 12:31, the custody bank, we have restricted disbursements on accounts tied to RS Housing Trust pending verification. Please do not engage the account owner. Words like sandbags stacked along a river. Linda from the library called, hushed but fierce. HR flagged 3 more employment verifications using your name. We marked them fraudulent. Also, a woman called asking whether you were emotionally unstable lately. I told her to mail her questions to our legal counsel. Thank you, I said, letting my shoulders remember the concept of being held. An hour later, Janet texted, they called me, compliance, I gave them everything. I'm sorry. Then another text, a screenshot, an old message from Rebecca, keep Sarah calm. Ask casually about their bank schedule. Beneath it, Janet's reply, got it. I stared at the screen until the words doubled. Ask casually about their bank schedule. A friendly latte turned into a surveillance microphone. Emma looked over my shoulder and said, without heat, people will do remarkable things for an invoice. At 2:09, my inbox chimed. From compliance, different tone now. MS Sterling has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Clients with potential exposure are being contacted. Attached was a bland letter that smelled like panic. At 2:34, a number I didn't know, a man introducing himself as Mr. Patel. Our statements don't add up, he said, voice tight. I saw your name on a neighborhood forum post about fraud resources. Whoever posted shared a checklist. It helped me see the holes. Don't thank me, I said carefully. Thank Daylight. Call the number on that list, ask for reconciliation. Keep copies of everything. Late afternoon, our mailbox tongued out official envelopes like a machine. Credit freeze confirmations. Fraud alert letters. The notice of closing we'd received sat on the counter under a legal pad with Emma's handwriting. Do not attend. Do not engage. Send copy to DFR and bank fraud. At 4:51, the custody bank called again. MS, Patterson, a wire to Coastal Title was attempted and denied. We're reviewing. Please confirm you did not authorize. I did not, I said, and felt something unclench that had been clenched since Tuesday. Thank you. You should also know we've begun an outreach to potentially affected clients at the advisory firm. Your report likely prevented additional movement. I sat on the floor between the island and the stove, letting my back find the cabinet. Emma slid down beside me, our shoulders a neat right angle. For 2 minutes we said nothing and listened to the refrigerator hum like a tired choir. Then the internet did what the internet does. At 5:22, Linda texted a link. Businessoldier, local, advisor placed on leave amid questions about client account reconciliations. No names of clients, no whistleblower mentioned. A photograph of the firm's lobby, the succulents dusted, the receptionist pretending not to look at the photographer. The article quoted a source familiar with the review saying, it started with a routine reconciliation. The word routine made me laugh in a way that didn't feel like laughing. Emma scrolled, ruthless. Comment section closed, she reported. Good. Does any of this make them safe? I asked, meaning everyone misses. K with the cherry buttons, the Patel kid who loved plot twists us. It keeps the water from rising, she said. It doesn't rebuild the house. The doorbell rang at 6:03. Not the pattern from earlier. A single, patient chime. I checked the peephole. A woman in a blazer, hair pulled back, camera crew on the sidewalk like polite furniture. She held a microphone with Channel 7 logo and a smile that knew how to live on air. Mrs. Patterson, she said through the door, chipper without being cruel. Jennifer Walsh, Channel 7 News. We're covering today's suspension at Sterling Advisory. We have sources who say an anonymous whistleblower provided detailed documentation. We'd love to thank the person who helped protect local families. Beside me, Emma's hand slid into mine. Her palm was dry and warm, the way her hand was when she was 5 and fearless at crosswalks. We don't comment, I said through the chain. Understood, she said, smile not moving. Just one question on background. Did the whistleblower come from inside the households that were harmed? Emma squeezed once. I didn't answer. Okay, the reporter said, stepping back, still smiling as if this were a holiday segment. If you change your mind, my card's in your mailbox. She walked away, the camera guy following. A satellite dish on the van turning its metal ear to the neighborhood. My phone buzzed before the porch light stopped swaying. Unknown number. If you don't retract by morning, I'll tell the court your daughter hacked us. Ex part at 8:30. See you there. We printed the guide on cream paper because white felt like a hospital. Digital safety for families, warning signs, and what to do next. Emma set the stack on the PTA table like she was laying down placemats. The multipurpose room smelled like coffee, dry erase, and the faint sugar burn of bake sale brownies. I'll speak, I told her. You sit. If anybody asks who wrote it, I'll say a librarian who loves forms. She nodded and took a seat in the second row, legs crossed at the ankle like she was trying not to look like a panelist. Dr. Reeves slid into the back with a discreet wave. Mr. Levin stood near the stage with a kettle for his steam engine demonstration. Because he never misses a chance to make history whistle, I stepped to the mic. I'm Sarah, I said, voice tinny at first, then finding a warmer note. A mom, also someone who learned faster than she wanted to about fraud that hides inside families. Heads lifted, some sympathetic, some defensive. This is not legal advice, I said. It is a list. Lists help when your hands shake. A laugh traveled the room like a small animal. I held up the cream paper. You don't need to know the whole ocean. You need to know your hallway's fire alarm. We walked through it. Watch for accounts renamed admin fee, pre-approvals you didn't ask for, surprise employment verifications. Do immediately, credit freeze for every adult and child, fraud alerts, file an identity theft report, call the custody bank if you have investments. Say, documentation, discrepancy, reconciliation. Avoid, arguing in lobbies, posting screenshots, calling anyone at the firm except compliance. Hands rose. A dad in a paint-splattered hoodie asked if freezing would hurt his mortgage fee. Temporarily, I said. You can thaw for a day with a PIN. The point is to keep strangers from skating on your credit while you're thinking about dinner. Mrs. K was there with the cherry button coat, not buttoned. She lifted the paper, index finger under a line. If my statement shows an admin fee I never saw before, how loud do I pull the alarm? Loud, I said. And send the math to the right desk, not the nice person at the front. The right desk has a case number. She nodded like she'd been waiting for permission. In the second row, Emma's mouth softened. At the end, Mr. Levin made the kettle scream. Industrial revolutions are about systems, he said, grinning at the kids who'd snuck into the back. Fixing them takes noise. The room laughed and then clapped, the kind that starts polite and turns real. A mom in yoga pants whispered, "Thank you," like a secret. A grandfather folded 3 cream sheets into his coat pocket like they were maps. Outside, Channel 7 idled, polite as a parked dog. Jennifer Walsh lifted her mic half an inch when she saw us. I shook my head. She lowered it and gave me a small, human look that said I have a boss and I'm also a person. Emma kept walking. Her palm brushed mine, a grounding wire. By the time we reached our block, the neighborhood forum had opinions. A new post, anonymous, beware guides written by vigilantes. Rumor says a minor has been hacking local professionals. Comments were what comments always are. 40% kind, 40% cruel, 20% off-topic about the pothole on Elm. Linda from the library replied once, surgical, city resources for identity theft are linked here, fax rumors. Then she closed her laptop and texted me a heart. Do we answer? I asked. Emma shook her head. We published the link list on the library site, the school site, and the cities. That's daylight. We don't feed shadows. We ate soup at the counter because I didn't have chairs for this kind of day. The guide sat between the salt and a jar of pencils. At 8:17, my phone buzzed. A neighborhood dad thanking whoever wrote the checklist. A photo of a statement with an admin fee circled in red and a thumbs-up emoji I didn't know could carry grief and relief at once. At 8:43, my screen lit with a new unknown. Retract by morning, or we tell the court your daughter is a hacker. The words wore cologne and cheap courage. A follow-up, X-part at 8:30, see you there. Emma read over my shoulder. They're going to try to make the judge afraid of computers, she said. They'll say big words and hope fear does the rest. What do we do? I asked. Keep receipts, arrive early, say documentation every third sentence. She wiped a crumb from the counter with her thumb. Also breathe. We packed a folder, fraud alerts, case numbers, credit freeze confirmations, the certified letter from Coastal Title with the cartoonish sticky, the officer's card. I added the cream guide because paper that helps felt like armor. Doorbell rang at 9:12. Not a knock. A ring, single, patient. I checked the peephole, no camera crew, no uniform. A woman in a blazer with her hair pulled into a too-high ponytail, rain catching in the split ends. She looked like a person who'd learned to wear a smile instead of a seatbelt and had just realized it won't save you. Sarah, she said through the door. I kept the chain on. Who are you? She glanced over her shoulder at the dark, as if it had opinions. Rebecca, she said, voice raw for the first time I'd heard it. I need to talk before they drag me under to save themselves. She swallowed. He told me you'd fold. You didn't. He's going to say your kid is a criminal. A breath that sounded like she'd been sprinting for months. Let me in, Sarah. I have ledgers that aren't his, and I don't want to go to jail for a man who wrote me out of the story when the money ran dry. I kept the chain on. Rebecca stood in the porch light with rain freckling her blazer, mascara half-stamped under one eye like a bruise she didn't remember choosing. I won't come in, she said quickly, hands up. Just please, I need to put something on record before his lawyers decide I'm their life raft. Daylight, Emma murmured behind me, which has become our prayer and our policy. We can meet somewhere with glass walls, I said through the gap. The library. Rebecca nodded like she'd rehearsed accepting terms. 15 minutes. We took the corner study room with the fishbowl windows and the carpet that smells like old paper and lemon cleaner. Rebecca sat with her bag in her lap like a kid in the principal's office. Up close she looked younger, like the kind of person who ironed her hair because someone once told her it made her look professional. Her hands shook only when they were still. First, she said, eyes flicking to Emma and back to me, I am not here to threaten anyone. I'm here to confess and to stop drowning alone. Then tell the truth, I said. She exhaled and opened her bag. No devices, just paper. Spreadsheets with headers that lived at her firm. A memo drafted in the voice of someone who thought memos could hide intent. Reconciliations that didn't reconcile, and sticky notes that said things like move admin fees and RS Housing Trust, make clean. Started small, she said, the words thick. Rounding pen is into whole numbers. Nobody notices when decimals shrug. Then Mark brought me a problem with a solution stapled to it. He said he needed a bridge just for a week. He said he was leaving an unhappy life and the fund was just sitting there. He said he'd put it back. I heard his voice in her sentences and hated it all over again. You helped him take the fund, I said. I created the path, she said, like the distinction might save a tooth in a mouth full of them. I doctored memos to look like fees and shifted them through an entity I control. He used your names to open the other lines. He's sloppy about paper but very good at convincing people he's the victim when money moves. Emma's pencil moved. Dates, she said gently. Rebecca listed them. Emma made a neat column. What changed for you? My father cut me off, she said, voice scraping. He found out about the transfers before I knew you'd noticed. He called me a thief in the lobby of his hospital. She swallowed. He wasn't wrong. Mark said he'd take care of me and then, a laugh that wasn't one. And then he stopped picking up. He texted that I should handle my own mess. That's a direct quote. Why come to us? I asked. Because you lit daylight, she said simply. The board, the bank, the regulator. Because when he goes under, he'll tell the judge you're turning your daughter into a criminal, and he'll make me his reason. He thinks if he paints this like a custody war, the math won't matter. She slid a stapled packet across the table. This is a statement. Timeline, amounts, who signed what. I'll give it to the regulator and your lawyer. You should have a copy too. I don't have a lawyer, I said, which sounded small. You do, Emma said, already tapping her phone. Legal aid returned our intake form. Intake at 9. Emergency counsel on call tonight. She showed me the email, Family Justice Center, pro bono assignment pending, and the number underlined. Rebecca rubbed the heel of her hand against her forehead, leaving a small smear of makeup. He filed an emergency motion, she said. Ex part 830. He wants to gag you, paint your guide as interference, and get a temporary order to make you shut up and hand over devices. She swallowed. He sent me the draft to admire. He loves drafts. Then we won't give him a quiet room, Emma said. We'll bring documents to people who like documents. Rebecca's jaw worked. I am sorry, she said, finally looking straight at me, not through me. I told myself stories about why good people do bad things. I called theft a bridge. I called fraud a fee. I called leaving you strength. I let his voice be louder than my own. You can't unsteal, I said. Honest, because that's the only way I know how to be now. But you can stop stealing. I'm trying, she said, voice barely there. Emma pulled out the cream guide and slid it across. When you talk to them, use the words on the left column, she said. They listen faster when you speak their dialect. Rebecca nodded, eyes glassing. Thank you. She stood like a person leaving a confessional without a penance plan and paused at the door. There's one more thing. He booked a one-way for Friday night. Jacksonville. He thinks if he leaves before the story hardens, he can reset somewhere with palm trees. A beat. He won't say it out loud, but he's afraid of your daughter. He should be afraid of math, Emma said, and Rebecca almost smiled. We watched her cross the lobby and hand her packet to the woman at the regulator's drop box. Daylight, glass walls. Copies for everyone who counts. On the walk home, my phone vibrated with a bank alert. Attempted new account opening, Sarah P. Maiden name, denied. Another chime, credit application, Emma P. Flagged, denied. A third, wire retry, coastal title, blocked. The phone in my hand became a metronome again, this time in our key. At home, the porch light flickered once like a wink. Waiting on the stoop, another envelope, cheap manila, our names written with a marker that smelled like high school detention. Inside, a color printout of our cream guide with vigilante scrawled across it in red. No return address, no courage. I was dialing the Family Justice Center when the line clicked to a human. This is Harper, a voice said, brisk and kind. I'm your emergency counsel for the morning. Send me the motion. The letters, your case numbers. Do not respond to any threats. We'll ask for our own relief. Relief, I repeated. A protective order, she said. And a preservation order on everything his side keeps accidentally losing. I forwarded, scanned, attached, CC'd, all the verbs that make paper real. Harper wrote back in 5 minutes with a draft that sounded like a person who knows exactly which syllables judges respect. She ended with, try to sleep. Your daughter is not on trial tomorrow. He is. We didn't sleep. We lay on top of the covers, shoes by the door, folder by the keys. At 1:24 a.m., my phone lit with Harper's name again. Subject signed. The PDF opened on a blue stamp that made my lungs unlock for the first time in a week. Temporary order. Petitioner Mark Patterson is restrained from contacting respondents Sarah and Emma Patterson, approaching their residence, or attempting any financial transaction using their identities, pending hearing. Emma read over my shoulder and exhaled, a sound like someone setting a heavy box on the floor. Daylight, she whispered. Headlights rolled across our ceiling then, slow as a thought, they paused, idled. The glow carved a rectangle over our wall of family photos, illuminating Emma at 5 in yellow rain boots. Mark crouched behind her, grinning with water on his lashes. The engine revved, low and mean. The headlights didn't move. Emma's hand found mine in the dark. The phone buzzed once more on the nightstand, a new notification skittering across the glass. Ring, motion detected, front door. The headlights hung on our wall like a warning. The ring notification chimed again, then saved a thumbnail. a sedan idling at 1:27 a.m., plate clear in the rain. Harper texted back in less than a minute. Save, duplicate, upload to the folder. I'll file a supplemental. By 7:40, we were on a bench outside Department 3 with a folder thick enough to feel like armor. Mark paced at the end of the hall in a suit he wore to other men's promotions. His lawyer was younger, hair sharp enough to cut paper. He clocked us, then steered Mark the other way. Harper arrived like weather efficient, all pockets. "We filed your ring clip," she said. "The protective order went in at 1:24 a.m. He showed up 3 minutes later. If he argues confusion, we'll let the timestamp talk." Inside, the courtroom smelled like disinfectant and wood that's heard every promise. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked at the stack on his bench with the patience of someone who reads for a living. "Patterson v. Patterson," the clerk called. Mark's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, before we begin, we ask the court to enjoin MS. Patterson and her agents from disseminating false statements that have destroyed my client's career and alienated his child. There is a vigilante campaign." Harper rose without hurrying. "Your Honor, if counsel says vigilante once more, I'll start objecting on the grounds of adjectives. We don't need rhetoric today, we need receipts." "Language," the judge said mildly. "Counsel, proceed with facts." Mark's lawyer cleared his throat. "MS, Patterson or persons acting on her behalf have accessed private systems and manufactured a narrative of fraud. We seek an immediate order to preserve and produce all electronic devices used by the minor child." I felt Emma stiffen beside me. Harper didn't touch her, she didn't have to. "Your Honor," Harper said, "the petition is a weapon dressed as a prayer. My clients reported reconciliations that don't reconcile. They froze credit. They forwarded bank letters that say custodial break and restricted disbursements. That's not a vigilante campaign. That's a Tuesday after fraud. Also," she lifted a page. "At 1:24 a.m., you signed a temporary order restraining petitioner from contacting or approaching respondents. At 1:27 a.m., respondent's doorbell camera recorded petitioner's vehicle and plate idling at their curb." She held up a photo that made my stomach drop. "We've submitted the clip." Mark took half a step like his body needed to edit the evidence. His lawyer put a hand on his sleeve and whispered no with his teeth. The judge watched the screen in silence while the clip played. Rain, headlights, a license plate in a frame from a car wash fundraiser, time code. The judge closed his eyes briefly like someone with a low-grade headache and opened them to look at Mark. "Mr. Patterson?" Mark stood. "I didn't approach," he said. "I drove by. I've lived on that street 22 years. It's muscle memory." "You idled," the judge said, voice flat. 3 minutes after a restraining order. That is not muscle, that is will." Mark's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, we argue he had not been served." Harper lifted a second sheet. "Proof of electronic service at 1:25 a.m. accepted." She paused. A minute before the camera caught him, the judge's mouth pressed into a line that wasn't a smile. "Counsel, your emergency motion for ex parte relief is denied. In its place, we'll formalize the existing protection and add a preservation order. Petitioner will preserve and produce within 14 days bank statements, communications with MS, Sterling, and any documents relating to accounts using respondents' identities." He turned to Mark. "If you drive by again, you can do it in a sheriff's transport." Mark stared at the table like it owed him something. His lawyer scribbled as if speed could manufacture dignity. Harper passed up a thin stack. "For the court's awareness, letters from the custody bank and the Division of Financial Regulation noting a reconciliation review already in progress. My clients reported discrepancies. The proper doors are open." The judge scanned, then nodded. "This court doesn't oversee criminal investigations," he said, "but we can and will forward to the district attorney anything suggesting identity theft." He looked over his glasses directly at Mark. "If there's nothing there, you'll have your exoneration. If there is, you'll have your day the other way." Mark couldn't help himself. "Your Honor, I was going to repay." "Stop," the judge said, not loudly. "It worked anyway. We're done with your intentions. We're dealing in actions. Now, temporary custody remains with MS. Patterson. No contact orders stay. We will set a status conference in 21 days on the civil aspects. MS, Patterson, you'll file for dissolution if you haven't already." I stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My clerk will give you the forms. MS. Sterling," he added, glancing at a back row I hadn't noticed until then. Rebecca stood, hands nervous at her sides, blazer still damp from last night's rain. "Your Honor," she said, voice low. "I've provided a written statement to the regulator and to Respondents' Counsel. I'm prepared to cooperate." Mark's head jerked toward her so fast the tendons in his neck stood out. "Traitor," he hissed. "Sit," his lawyer said, forgetting to whisper. The judge wrote something I couldn't see and looked up with courtroom calm. "We are adjourned." The gavel didn't slam. It clicked the way a door closes when you've accepted it. In the hallway, Mark moved like gravity had changed. He drifted in our direction before remembering the order and stopping 2 tiles short. "Sarah," he said softly, as if the right tone could replace a life. "We can fix this." Emma stared at him, her face still. "You can learn from it," she said. "Fixing belongs to the people you broke." A deputy shifted between us, not unkind. Mark looked like he might speak again and then seemed to taste the idea and reject it. He turned away. Harper handed me a list that was less like homework and more like a map. "File the dissolution today, send the cream guide to the D.A.S. Consumer Unit, forward Rebecca's packet, keep devices backed up, speak only through counsel." "You did well," she said to Emma. "I didn't do anything," Emma said. "The numbers did." "That's what doing well looks like here," Harper said. We left with a printout of orders, a date circled in highlighter, and a quiet inside my ribs that felt like scaffolding instead of a hole. Outside, the sky was the color of nickels. Reporters waited along the steps like a slow-moving fence. Jennifer Walsh lifted her mic a respectful inch. I shook my head and she lowered it. A human first, a journalist second. At home, the porch smelled like wet cardboard. A courier envelope leaned against the door with our names printed too carefully. I signed because there was no point pretending life wasn't paper now. Inside, a subpoena deuces tecum, bring documents, bring devices. Attached were exhibits Mark's team planned to use. I flipped the first page and felt the ground tilt. Exhibit A, Nuco Education Services. Account opening 2018. The account was not ours. It used my maiden name and an address we hadn't lived at in a decade. Deposits matched the dates I remembered as he's working late. The authorized signers were listed in neat, bureaucratic type. Authorized signers, Mark Patterson. Secondary authorized signer, Janet Quinn. For long beat, I only saw the 2 lines at the bottom of the page. Authorized signers, Mark Patterson. Secondary authorized signer, Janet Quinn. The courtroom air thinned. Paper thundered in my ears. 20 years of coffee and carpool, wrapped in a neat, bureaucratic font. Harper didn't blink. "Good," she said. "Good." I could barely get the word out. "It ties a third party to Nuco," she said low, quick. "Their exhibit, their admission. We route it to the D.A. and the regulator. You do not contact her." Emma's pencil tapped once against the folder. "We keep receipts," she said. On the walk to the car, I saw other things. Janet in my kitchen in a sweater the color of wet sand, spreading goat cheese on crackers and asking Emma about vocabulary words. Janet texting me, "You okay?" After the ultrasound that came up empty. Janet laughing at Mark's lasagna like it was a joke that kept. I tasted metal. At home, Emma set the folder on the counter like a center of gravity and opened her laptop. 1 hour, she said, then we breathe. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Building handrails," she said. On the screen, a simple page with a simple name, Family Financial Protection, and text that sounded like Emma. "I teach families to see red flags, freeze credit, document fraud, and route reports. I don't hack, I don't accuse. I help you pull the right fire alarm." A box that said pay what you can. A button that said book a 30-minute session. A sentence at the bottom in bold, "This is not legal advice. I will point you to people who give legal advice. You don't have to do this today," I said. "I do when people are drowning now," she said. "We don't tell them to wait for boats." Her first email arrived before she published a single post. Subject line, "Please help, my brother opened a card in my name." Then another, "Mom took from my 529, what do I do?" A message from a grandfather who couldn't hear well but could type. "Admin fees, what are those?" Emma answered like a person in a radio booth with a small town on the other end. "Step 1, freeze. Step 2, fraud alert. Step 3, file here." She copy-pasted the cream guide paired to essentials. "We are not helpless," she typed. "Write that on your refrigerator." In between messages, she added a line to the homepage. "If you can't pay, book anyway." At 2, Mr. Patel called again, voice steadier. "They answered my email," he said. I said reconciliation and they started typing faster. "Thank you for the words." "Thank daylight," I said, "and keep copies of everything." He hesitated. "If you ever need an affidavit, call me." After we hung up, Emma looked at me over the screen. "Do you hear the way people breathe when you give them a word?" she asked. "Like a key turning." I did. The house had more air than yesterday. We took a walk to remember our legs. The sky was dishwater gray. The maples had started their slow surrender. On the corner, Mrs. K, in the cherry button coat, waved with 2 fingers and clutched her tote with the cream guides like prayer cards. Past the playground, Janet sat on a bench alone, elbows on knees, phone face down. She stood when she saw us. "Sarah." Harper's voice in my head, "You do not contact her." My feet kept moving anyway. 5 minutes, I said, stopping at the edge of the mulch. "In daylight," she nodded, eyes rimmed red. I didn't know it would have your names, she said, which is not the same as saying she didn't know. Rebecca said Nuko was a pass-through. She said it was common. She says a lot of things, I said. One of them got you paid. Janet flinched. It wasn't like that. What was it like? I asked. Explain to me what it's like to be the secondary signer on a fake education account attached to my child. Her jaw worked. I was trying to get ahead. Do you remember when my rent went up? You said, ask around, Rebecca asked. She offered a retainer. It felt like oxygen. Mark said it was temporary. He said he'd pay it back. I thought, she rubbed her eyes. I thought if I didn't look too hard, it wouldn't be what it was. Looking hard is the job, I said. She nodded small. I talked to compliance, she said. They called me. I told them everything I signed. I gave them emails. I don't know what it saves. Not you, Emma said, voice gentle and exact. But maybe someone down the list. Janet studied Emma like a stranger. You always were sharp, she said weakly. I learned from the adults, Emma said. And Janet closed her eyes like she'd been hit with something soft that still bruised. I slid the spare key off my ring and set it on the bench beside her. You don't live in our house anymore, I said. You don't live in our stories. She nodded, lips pressed tight to keep in words that would make this conversation about her. On the way home, my phone pinged. Compliance, client outreach ongoing. Preliminary review indicates funds diverted through RS Housing Trust. Restitution pool may be established pending outcome. The word restitution felt like a raft tied to a dock you were not allowed to climb on yet. At 4, Dr. Reeves emailed, proud of how you routed your energy. Remember to make room for small joys. Emma printed it and taped it above her desk. Beneath it she wrote in pencil, make room. By 5, the library had added a new page under resources, financial safety, where to start with the city's consumer unit number, the freeze links, and a PDF of Emma's cream guide with the library logo at the bottom. Linda texted, you made us better today. Heart, book emoji. We ate pasta without Mark's lasagna theater. Emma told me about Mr. Levin's unit test and how kids kept writing steam engines fix everything in the margins. I told her about a woman at the PTA who whispered that she kept her PINs in a recipe box labeled holiday cookies as if that were a crime, and we laughed until it didn't hurt. After dinner, an email arrived from an address that sounded like an airport hotel. Mid-Atlantic Info Sec Summit. Keynote invitation, E. Patterson. The body was crisp, respectful. We've seen your guide. We'd like you to address family-scale cyber hygiene via encrypted video. Honorarium attached. You may appear without camera. We don't need your age. We need your brain. Emma read it twice. Yes, she said simply. We do stairs. I watched her draft a talk outline, red flags in plain sight. Words that open locked doors at banks. How to freeze, thaw, and stay human. She drew a little box in the corner and wrote breathe. Harper called at 8. 2 things, she said. 1. The DAS office is opening a formal identity theft investigation. 2. We received additional discovery from his side. You should see it. My inbox chimed. Exhibit B signature card, new co-education services. The scan filled the screen. My name in my maiden hand. My old address, my signature. That's not mine, I said, even though the swoop of the S could have convinced a casual eye. Emily. They traced it, she said, from something old. From what? I asked, already knowing where the answer lived in my body. Harper zoomed the notary block. The stamp was crisp, Notary Public State, ID hash 7319. The name above the stamp turned my stomach into ice. Who had our mortgage file from 2009? I asked, though the room had already answered. Emma's eyes met mine. Janet. The porch light flicked. A soft thump sounded against our door, then hurried footsteps on the walk. I opened it to a plain manila envelope with our last name printed in block letters. No stamp, no address. Inside, a single sheet, handwritten, and a small plastic fob with a bank's logo. The note was short, I'm sorry. It was in my desk. I can't carry it anymore. Don't let him have the last word. Underneath the note, clipped to the fob, a sticky with 3 words in Janet's careful hand. Nuco master login. We set the manila envelope on the kitchen island like it might bite. The plastic fob with the bank's logo sat on top, light as lint, heavy as a safe. Janet's note, I'm sorry, master login, leaned against the salt. Do we use it? I asked. Emma shook her head. We don't touch stolen keys, she said. We hand it to Harper and the D.A. Daylight only. The doorbell rang short long before I could answer. Through the peephole, Mark. No liar, no suitcase. Just the face I'd folded towels next to for 22 years now, with a trim beard like he thought changing the outline would change the person inside it. Sarah, he said through the wood. I just want to talk, 2 minutes. Recording, Emma said quietly, tapping her phone. A red dot glowed like a heartbeat. I slid the chain to the last notch and opened the door 3 inches. You're violating a court order, I said. I'm on the sidewalk, he said, toe on the concrete seam. Happy, this is still contact. He lifted his hands. Fine, then listen from there. They're painting me into a monster and you're letting them do it. You know me. I thought I did. He winced. It looked practiced. I made mistakes. I panicked. I was under pressure. I never meant to hurt. Stop, I said, tired of the same sentence wearing different shoes. You took our daughter's fund, you used our names, you tried to buy a house in Florida with my child's social. Intention doesn't move numbers back. You sound like a brochure, he snapped, the mask slipping. You always loved paper more than people. Behind me, Emma stepped into view. Paper remembers when people lie, she said, his eyes fixed on her. He softened his mouth into an expression I recognized from birthday mornings and the first day of kindergarten. Hey, Bug, he said, and the nicknaming made something in me boil. Don't, Emma said. Please, he said, I'm still your father. You taught me to protect myself, she said. I learned. He took a half step, caught himself on the order like a dog on an invisible fence. They're saying I committed fraud, he said, the word like a foreign language he didn't want to conjugate. They're dragging my name. It's your mother. She's doing this. Compliance is doing this, Emma said evenly. The bank is doing this. The regulator is doing this. Mom is cooking dinner and printing forms. He laughed once dry. And what are you doing, counselor? Writing pamphlets, playing hacker? Documenting, she said. Using words judges like, routing through doors you hate. He glanced past me and his eyes landed on the island on the plastic fob glinting in the light. The look that crossed his face was pure and unguarded. Surprise, then calculation, then a private greed. Where did you get that? He asked. From someone who stopped drowning alone, I said. His jaw clenched. She'll regret it, he said low. Everyone does. Sirens ghosted somewhere 2 streets over. He heard them too. The tendons in his neck tightened. Mark, I said, because maybe the person I married still had a pilot light. Turn around, walk away. Call your lawyer from someplace that isn't our porch. I'm here to make a deal, he said quickly, leaning on the word like it had ever meant salvation. You hand over whatever you think you have. You retract whatever you told whoever. We tell the judge this is a family misunderstanding, emotions, miscommunications. I make you whole, I fix it. You can't make me whole, I said. I'm not a ledger. He swallowed. Fine, then at least stop your child before she burns the only bridge left. Emma's mouth tipped, almost curious. What bridge? The one to my boss, to the D.A., to the court of public opinion. If you keep pressing, there won't be anything left of me worth suing. Think tactically for once, Sarah. You're not a war, I said. You're a consequence. The sirens grew louder. He glanced down the street and then back at me and some wires snapped. They're going to say I violated the order, he said. You're going to nod and pretend you didn't invite me to talk. Then they'll haul me out and you'll feel righteous for exactly 12 hours until you need rent. I almost smiled. We paid the rent yesterday, I said, with my job and some kindness. His stare sharpened. Did you ever stop to think about why I did it? He asked. Why I needed out. You suffocate, Sarah. You and your labels and your schedules and your pinched little librarian life. Rebecca made me feel like my lungs worked. She said I could build something. You built something, I said. A lie with a mortgage. Tires crunched. A cruiser slipped to the curb at the end of our walk, lights off but inevitable. Mark's shoulders rose. His voice dropped to a hiss only the 3 of us could hear. You want a truth? He said. Go pull the Secretary of State's records on Nuco. Read the officers, see whose names I put there. If I go down, you go with me. Public filings don't make forged signatures legal, Emma said. They make headlines, he said. They make doubts. They make custody judges ask questions you can't answer in a sentence. The cruiser door opened. The same officer from the non-emergency call stepped onto our walk, another behind him. Mr. Patterson, he called, tone polite. We need to talk about violating a restraining order. Mark pasted on a neighbor's smile. Officer, I was just leaving, he said, just saying hello to my family. You were served at 1:25 a.m., the officer said. Let's walk to the car. This is insane, Mark said. I live here. Not today you don't. Officer said, hands where I can see them. For a second I thought he'd go clean, arms out, wrists offered. Then he looked at Emma as if measuring how fast a lie could travel and chose a different sin. He twisted toward the lawn instead of the walkway, a sudden jag of movement that made the officer's hand go to his shoulder. The second officer stepped in. It wasn't violent and it wasn't pretty. 30 seconds later his hands were behind him and clicks closed what words couldn't. Sarah, he said, when the world shrank down to car door and wrists and breath that wanted air. His voice turned soft, practiced, the one from baby nights and electricity outages when we lit 3 candles. Ask her what she's done to you. Ask her who she's turning you into. Ask her what she's hiding behind that guide. Enough, I said, quieter than I felt. He searched my face for purchase and didn't find any. Then he pivoted to Emma, last attempt. You think you're a hero, he said. Go look up Nuco. Go see who's president and treasurer. Go see who owns the trust. I left you a present. That's not how presents work, Emma said. The door shut on whatever he tried to say next. The cruiser pulled away. The porch sagged 30 years. My knees remembered gravity. Emma slid beside me on the step. Neither of us spoke. The recording red dot winked out. Do you want to look? She asked finally. The Secretary of State, I said. Public records. Daylight, she said. We sat side by side on the stoop with a porch light. Mosquitoes worshipped and typed with thumbs that wanted to shake. I opened the state's business search. Newco Education Services. The result came up in clean government font. Active, registered, address I didn't live at. Officers, President Sarah Patterson, Treasurer Emma Patterson, Secretary Janet Quinn. The words were so polite about their violence that I almost laughed. I didn't. My mouth made the shape and then remembered the rest of my face wasn't invited. He papered us into his shell, I said, voice scraping. Emma's eyes were already scanning. It's recent, she said, jaw tightening. Filed last week. He backfilled the inception date to look older. Why? To make you doubt yourself, she said. To make a judge doubt you, to make reporters print alleged near your name. She looked at the screen again, then at me. We'll undo it. We'll use daylight. We'll file an affidavit. We'll show the forged notary. My phone buzzed in my hand. A new email slid onto the lock screen like a snake. From Coastal Title and Escrow. Subject, beneficiary change processed, RS Housing Trust. The timestamp was 5 minutes ago. The body previewed 3 lines I could read without opening. This confirms a change of beneficiaries for RS Housing Trust. Primary beneficiary, Sarah Patterson, President, Newco Education Services. Secondary beneficiary, Emma Patterson, Treasurer. Emma's hand tightened on my sleeve. The porch light hummed. Down the block, a dog barked like a metronome. Mom, she said, voice very calm and very small at the same time. He didn't just want to drown alone. We stared at the email like it might crawl off the screen. This confirms a change of beneficiaries for RS Housing Trust. Primary beneficiary, Sarah Patterson, President, Newco Education Services. Secondary beneficiary, Emma Patterson, Treasurer. He's trying to drag us into his boat, I said, the words dry in my mouth. If it sinks, we're on the manifest. Emma didn't blink. Daylight, she said, already forwarding the message to Harper, the regulator, and the custody bank with a subject line that didn't panic. Unauthorized beneficiary change. Identity theft active. Harper called within a minute. Don't reply to Coastal. Don't click anything. I'll get the title company's compliance head on the phone and file for an emergency order reversing any change. Also, good job not touching that fob. She meant the plastic key sitting on our island like a sin. I slid it into a new envelope with Janet's note and wrote for DA across the front, my hand steadier than it had a right to be. Harper, Emma said, voice even, the beneficiary email cites my mother's role in Newco. He filed public business records last week listing us as officers to seed doubt. He set the prop table, Harper said. We'll light it up. 2 calls later, the title company's compliance officer was on speaker, tight and tired. Those changes cannot be processed without wet signatures and verified ID, she said. What you received is a phishing-style confirmation from a spoofed domain. We've frozen the file. I'm sending you a formal reversal letter and a hold notice. The reversal arrived like rain on dry dirt. Harper filed it with our protective order and added an emergency motion with phrases that felt like steel. Fraudulent beneficiary designation, bad faith filings, immediate injunctive relief. The judge stamped it before midnight. Somewhere between the kitchen and the couch, my lungs remembered their job. We walked the house while the printer spit out copies, flashlights flicking along baseboards the way we used to when Emma was 5 and afraid of dust bunnies with agendas. In the hallway, our family photos looked back at us. Mark at the beach holding Emma above a wave, her arms thrown wide, salt drying in her hair. The year she wore a cardboard astronaut helmet to the library Halloween party because books are space if you let them. Take down what hurts? I asked, hand hovering near the frames. Emma shook her head. Leave the evidence, she said softly. We were real even if he wasn't. Morning came in gray plates. We sat in Department 3 again. Harper spoke without heat. Petitioner tried to launder his victims into beneficiaries and paper respondents into his shell. We have the reversal, the spoof analysis, the filings, and the notary that doesn't notarize. The judge read, and the lines around his eyes deepened like someone tracing a map. Any further contact or manipulation of titles, trusts, or business records touching these respondents will be grounds for contempt, he said. The court orders the immediate preservation of all Newco and RS Housing Trust records and authorizes the district attorney to obtain them by warrant. He looked over his glasses at Mark. You don't get to make your crimes their inheritance. By lunch, The DA's office had the fob, Janet's note, Rebecca's packet, the ring clip, and the beneficiary reversal. Janet met them at the glass doors with a face the color of typing paper. She didn't look at me. Good, this wasn't about reunion, it was about receipts. Rebecca showed up too, edges frayed but eyes clear, carrying a banker's box that made a dull thud when she set it on the counter. 2 sets of ledgers, she said, not melodramatic now, just a person who had finally named the thing. The ones we sent clients, and the ones we used to lie to ourselves. Logs tell stories no one wants to read. The DA's investigator walked us through them in a small room with a rubber plant losing a leaf, IP addresses, edit trails, draft dates. The beneficiary change request came from Mark's phone using a VPN that wasn't clever enough. The new co-officers, filing, used a notary stamp attached to an account touched by Janet's work machine the same day Coastal Title received a wire request with my kid's name as a through line. None of it was complex. It was sloppy and confident, and counted on fear to do the heavy lifting. Daylight did the rest. The house in Florida never closed. The RS Housing Trust unraveled under compliance like a sweater with a bad snag. The custody bank began a restitution pool for clients whose numbers had been moved like pieces on a board they didn't know they were playing. When the letter came, the amount for Emma's college fund on the second page made my throat go tight. Not the whole thing, not even half, but enough to feel the ground tilt back toward level. It helps, Emma said, and it doesn't erase. Both were true. Mark stopped sending letters. His lawyer did not. Words like mitigating circumstances and pressure piled up in expensive paragraphs. The DA met them with words that don't care about intentions when you sign other people's names. Identity theft, wire fraud, attempted mortgage fraud, contempt. Rebecca signed a cooperation agreement that read like a confession and a receipt. Janet's path was narrower, an immunity letter that made her useful but not innocent. She sent me no messages, which was the only apology that had weight. Life got small on purpose. We moved to an apartment with sun on the kitchen table in the morning and a neighbor who watered our basil when we forgot. Our furniture learned to be modest. I learned to make a week's dinner out of 3 grocery runs and a back pocket recipe for beans that taste like forgiveness if you add enough garlic. On the day Emma gave her video talk to the Mid-Atlantic InfoSec Summit, the living room looked like a studio we could afford. Lamp with a cooler bulb, laptop on a stack of cookbooks, the cream guide taped to the wall outside the camera frame like a teleprompter written by a child and a librarian. She spoke in that calm that used to scare me and now steadied me. Here's how you know what your numbers are saying. Here's how to freeze. Here's how to thaw for a day. Here's how to say discrepancy without crying. And here's how to keep a little room in your life for joy because fear is an accountant that overcharges. The chat filled with thank yous and also a person insisting she was a hoax. It's fine, Emma typed back, without punctuation. You can be safe even if you don't believe me. Dr. Reeves kept seeing us. Sometimes Emma talked and sometimes she didn't. Sometimes she sat and traced the word make room with her fingertip until the pencil indent filled with skin. I cried once in the parking lot over a car that looked like Mark's, and Emma handed me a napkin and didn't say anything, which is sometimes the kindest sentence. At the library, Linda added a bookmark bowl at the checkout with freeze links on one side and a tiny quote on the other. Daylight is a deterrent. Moms took them like mints. Kids used them as rulers. Mr. Levin asked Emma to grade the short answers on the steam engine quiz, and she did, red pen soft on wrong answers, circling the ones that almost understood and writing close beside them because close matters. On a Saturday that smelled like rain and cumin, the DA called with the kind of voice that stands 2 feet from victory. He pled to identity theft and attempted wire fraud, sentencing in 3 months. Restitution recommended, a no-contact order for 10 years. I thanked her and hung up and listened to the kettle begin to sing. Emma watched my face and didn't ask, which made me braver. He pled, I said. She nodded once, like a person putting a book on a shelf. That night we cooked something that took too long just because we had time now. Chicken braised with lemons, and a pan sauce we could have done without and didn't. We ate at the tiny table by the window, where a plant I kept forgetting to water kept forgiving me by being alive. We told stories that made us laugh and hurt in the same sentence. The first grade field trip, where Mark bought 3 ponchos, and wore all of them because the sky didn't read the forecast. The night the power went out and we played Go Fish by candlelight, and Emma cried because she could see our faces in the dark at the same time. After dishes, Emma arranged her pencils, checked the locks, and stood at the sink, not looking at me. Do you ever miss the version of him where the lasagna didn't taste like a lie? She asked. Yes, I said. I love the idea of us, and sometimes I miss the idea. Loving the idea is free, living with it costs. She nodded. I don't want to be a person who only knows how to catch people doing wrong, she said. You're not, I said. You're a person who knows how to make people safer, even me. She leaned her head against my shoulder, the way she did when her feet didn't reach the floor. For a moment the room held both of us at 7 and 38, and every age in between. The next morning the mailbox gave us a letter from the restitution administrator with more decimals than I'd seen in months, and an apology printed in a serif font too pretty for apologies. We put it in a folder labeled receipts because we're funny like that now. Then we went to the farmer's market and bought strawberries from a man who wanted to tell us about soil. We let him. Emma corrected his math about yield with a smile. He laughed and threw in a fistful of mint. On Monday, my phone buzzed with a notification from the library website. Financial safety, where to start had been clicked 472 times in 3 days. I printed the page and taped it under Make Room on Emma's wall, not because she needed proof but because I did. At 9:07 that night, while we were arguing about whether pancakes count as dinner, they do, the laptop pinged. A new email slid into the family financial protection inbox with a subject line that was already familiar. Admin fee I don't recognize, what do I do? Emma looked at me. I looked back. She opened the message, read it once and set her fingers on the keys. Do you want me to answer? I asked. She smiled the kind of smile that makes rooms bigger. We can answer together. She typed, Step 1, freeze your credit. Step 2, call the custody bank and say reconciliation discrepancy. Step 3, keep copies, you're not helpless, we'll walk you through it. She hit send and closed the laptop like putting a book back where it belongs. The room was quiet except for the street outside remembering to be a street. Kid, I said, touching her cheek the way I used to when she fell asleep in the car and I didn't want to wake her. What you did, she shook her head. What we're doing, she corrected. It doesn't end, that's not the bad news. I waited. That's the hope, she said. The kettle began to whistle like Mr. Levin's classroom. The porch light hum was softer in this place. We ate pancakes for dinner because you should when you can. When the inbox chimed again, another family. Another admin fee, Emma glanced at me. Always, she said, and we started.